Hi Brent, thanks for the footage. Just following on from our recent FaceTime and sort of back and forth on Messenger. The most recent footage, just want to quickly look. The takeaway is actually coming on. The knees are changing flex in a much more appropriate manner. Interestingly, when out on the golf course compared to the range footage, the handle sits relatively low. And I know you're not hitting a long club here, but I'd want to see the hands or the handle raised to a roundabout belt buckle height. So that's a little sort of posture change, nothing too dramatic, just keeping everything a little bit more balanced, making it a little bit easier for you to move during the takeaway. That initial move, it's almost like you've got to raise the handle to get past the trail leg. That adds a little bit of roll, which is why occasionally the club looks like it's inside the hands a little bit too much at P2. Shoulder tilts can get a little bit level. Knees are changing flex much better, as you can see there now. I actually love what I'm seeing here. And interestingly, I'm just going to take the driver swing back. Driver swing's not too dissimilar at that point. So the differences which are quite sort of unusual and need to be looked at are you've much more extension in the trail side with an iron than you have with your driver. When it's actually the driver where you need more extension because we're trying to hit the ball further, so we want the hips or the pelvis to rotate more. And you can see there's more pelvic rotation with the iron than there is with the driver. So I actually like where you are in regards to the lower body on the left-hand footage more than the swing on the right. I think it's a little bit more appropriate. I'd expect to see the leg action almost like reversed. So that trail leg extends. It extends incrementally throughout the backswing. And the longer the club, the more extension we should see. The shorter the club, the less extension we should see. That aside, I really like where you are here in regards to the arm structure that we discussed in your original session. However, you just continue to load accumulator 4, load accumulator 1, right arm, load accumulator 4, lead arm, left arm. And you also sort of overextend a little bit in regards to the spine as well with the iron. And that's, again, something that you don't necessarily do with your driver, which is quite unusual. So just a little bit of a balancing act to be had and a little bit of consideration to be given in regards to how much to extend, how much to load. So I'm just going to clear that up for you from down the line with your iron. We want your accumulators loaded by P3. So we want accumulator 4 to have travelled across the chest, accumulator 1, the right arm, to have bent or loaded to about 90 degrees, accumulator 2, the wrists, to have hinged to about 90 degrees in relation to the lead arm. So the accumulators are loaded by P3. From P3 to P4, I don't want any more loading of the accumulators. I just want them propelled further courtesy of the extension, the turn, and the side bend. And that's what we're seeing there in the sort of initial stages of that sort of move from 3 to 4. What we then need to do is control that so that we don't go too far back, like we see here. So we don't need excessive extension. There's a little bit too much loading of 4, a little bit too much loading of 1, and a little bit too much extension. If that was viewed from face on, you'd see the head moving around in the box in a certain manner. It would probably go up and forward a little bit. So fully loaded at 3, traveling to 4. And the checkpoint when you're filming this is at all times, with an iron at least, I want to see the head of the club above the hands. If we start to load too much, the club head disappears behind the hands, or in this instance, goes underneath the hands. So that's the completion of your backswing, the maintenance of the structure in the arms, etc., and a little bit on what the knees are doing during the backswing as well that you need to consider. Now then, During the downswing, there is a rolling aspect. Throughout the swing, there's a rolling aspect, particularly during the downswing. And that rolling aspect should be occurring from P6 to P8, and that's the accumulator 3, the release of accumulator 3. Now, when you have an iron in your hand, you start to unload accumulator 3 too much too soon. You get quite steep on it. And it's that rolling aspect which is causing that steep angle of attack. So whenever you roll the club, that rolling aspect doesn't always just shut the club face. In this instance, it affects the swing's direction. You can see there that the club head is well outside the hands, and it affects the angle of attack. So you're coming in steep, lead knee stays flexed because the ball's on the floor, and that's where the deep divots, potential heavy shots, certainly strong to low flighted, shorter and mid irons. So there is too much of a rolling aspect too soon. So P5 would expect to see the shaft mid bicep. By P6 we'd expect to see the sweet spot inside the hands. And we'd expect to see the club tracing a more inward arc into that golf ball, which would be shallower. So to encourage this, because we're pretty good at P4, especially when we don't overload, what we're going to do is we're going to put an object down on the ground. I'm just going to use a different graphic for this. I want an object down on the ground about an inch away from the toe end of your golf club at address and angled in about 5 degrees. And that's to encourage a sweet spot that moves in a little bit earlier during the takeaway, and it will discourage this movement out of the sweet spot during transition, because you can see there you'd hit that object. When I'm at the range, I tend to use a range basket. You'll see some footage on my channel of that. When I'm out on the grass, I'll tend to use I don't know, like a bottle of water or even a little piece of wood that we carry around, and just to prevent the sweet spot moving away from the player and moving out during the downswing. So if I get a chance, I'll send you some links across. In fact, send me a reminder on Messenger or WhatsApp to send you some links across of players I've worked with doing that sort of drill. So a little bit less loading of 4 and 1, consideration about what the knees should do from club to club, and then altering this rolling aspect. That's with an iron. Interestingly, with a driver, because we tend to shift forward more in transition with a lower centre, which shallows out that transition, so you can see you're much deeper. Camera angle's different, but you're much deeper at 5. Sweet spot's more in behind the hands. What we now have is we have an excessive rolling of the club face, which is why, again, that ball comes out relatively low. See, the ball flight's quite piercing at that point. We can see the club tends to sort of appear quite low beneath the shoulder, and then the hands exit quite high above the shoulder. So that's a sign that there's a little bit, quite excessive amount of accumulator 3 as you come through, which is that rolling aspect. Now, the best remedy for that is what we talked about last time, where when viewed from face on, I'm just going to try and do a little stickman diagram for you here. When viewed from face on, completion of the swing, get the correct graphic up. Sorry about this. Failed art at school, obviously. Completion of the swing. Not too bad in the end. Both arms pointing straight down the golf course. Bolt straight. Club out in front of you. No rolling or reduced amount of rolling at this point in the swing. That's going to tidy up a little bit of this sort of leg action footwork that we see as well. where the heel sort of pops round a little bit and the head comes off the wall. So that still needs an element of work. So controlling the sweet spot, controlling the rolling aspect, and also controlling the loading of the accumulators during the backswing. If you've got any questions regarding this, feel free to fire them straight across on the messenger, and we can start the back and forth before the upcoming FaceTime.